There were 5 team captains named today. First off, on the offensive side of the football, we had 2 names, quarterback Taylor Green, to nobody's surprise, and then offensive tackle Fernando Carmona, also not really a surprise as well. Most of these names are pretty chalk. On the defensive side of the football, we got defensive lineman Cam Ball, linebacker Xavier Sorey Jr., and then at the special teams, this is where there's going to be a second name named on Wednesday, Coach Pittman said, but the first one is punter Devin Bale. So if you had to look at most all conference predictions by any really news outlet or the SEC, you're going to see these 5 names across a lot of those. So these 5 really aren't to anybody's surprise. Green and Carmona on the offense, Ball and Sorey on the defense, and then punter Devin Bale. I think we kind of all expected those 5. I'll be interested to see who the 6th special teamer is. I don't know if that's somebody that could be like a return man, like a Cam Shanks, or if it's just going to be like our long snapper or kicker or something. So not sure who that's going to be, but those are the 5 names like most people expected. So those are the first 2 points. But the third thing we're going to be talking about this first segment is the Arkansas football depth chart that just got released for the Alabama A&M game. So this is a big deal. And we're going to be looking at just kind of all the names, some of the ones we didn't really expect, some of the ones we did expect. But I think that there's a lot to learn from this. And so we're going to talk a little bit of it. So let's take a look. If I can get this pulled up. Okay. So obviously, quarterback position's not that much of a surprise. Taylor Green. If anything, maybe Trevor Jackson over Grayson Wilson at the 3 spot, but that's just kind of some real deep cuts right there. Running back, Mike Washington's named the running back. In a lot of these, you'll see an or. So an or just means that a lot of these guys will kind of be splitting reps. Even though a dude is listed first, there's really it really could be either or. So an interesting point here on the running back position is Mike Washington is just a full-time starter. Braylon Russell's going to be the backup, and Rodney Hill and AJ Green rounded out. So Mike Washington, it seems like he'll probably get more reps than Russell. This game against Alabama A&M, we'll talk about it a little bit later. I think that's probably better. Washington, I think, fits a little more of what we're going to try to do on offense this first game. The X position, the wide receiver, the first one, Omega Blake. A lot of people saw him as a starter, the guy out of Charlotte. Monte Harrison, who's had a really good camp at the 2 spot, and then the true freshman, Jacaden Ferguson at the 3 for the X position. The Z receiver, Jalen Brown, I think a little bit of a surprise to some people. The transfer out of Florida State, I didn't really expect him to be here as the starting Z receiver. Andy Jean, the transfer out of Pitt, played some time at Florida. And then Courtney Crutchfield, those guys are listed as or. Crutchfield, that 4-star guy who was originally committed us, now plays for us but came from Missouri. Those 2 guys are going to round out that Z position. I could see really any of those 3 really taking that over middle of the season. And then the W receiver, I think this one is maybe the most surprising. Raylan Sharp and Cam Shanks, the 2 like non-Power 5 receivers that came in, all conference players. I think one of those were probably expected to take that slot position. Like I mentioned earlier, Raylan Sharp was injured throughout some of camp, so he could have maybe taken this position, but Pittman talked about it today. CJ Brown, who's got a lot of speed, they want to get him on the field. He's the number 1 guy at that W position. They're going to run him a lot in the slot, so expect to see big things from him. Tight end spot, they broke it up into two different ones. Rohan Jones is going to be more of our receiving tight end, and then Andreas Paskey, or Jaden Platt. Those 2 guys, Platt, the um, transfer out of Texas A&M. Those 2 guys are going to be more of our blocking tight ends. So Jones, Paskey, those 2 guys will probably see the most. Evidently, a little bit of Platt as well. Offensive line, some of these we really expected. Corey Robinson at the left tackle position, Carmona at left guard, Kittler at center. And then the right guard and the right tackle position is really where we were going to be interested to see who is going to be starting. It seems like Kobe Branham is going to be right guard. Right tackle is going to be Amarion Harris. Shaq McRoy, a backup player at the right tackle position. Pittman said he was going to try to get a lot from him this weekend. And also Marion Harris at left tackle seemed like was something he was going to prioritize. And then the backup right guard, I guess it's technically a Marion Harris, but another name on there, Marcus Dumerville, the transfer from Maryland. He threw a third name in there for the center position. Brooks Edmondson, Cash Courtney above him. But a lot of these spots we saw coming. If I had to kind of make a main takeaway from this offensive position that I really want to focus on, that would be Mike Washington really being the primary running back over Russell, CJ Brown being a starter over Raylan Sharp and Cam Shanks, and then probably that right guard, right tackle position ultimately ending out and Branham and Harris. And I think that's what we expected towards the end of this like camp, but for it to finally and like actually happen, now we got it in writing that's going to be at least for the Alabama A&M game. So switch over to the defensive end. A lot of these names you should see after that episode we did last week, going through each of the position groups. But Quincy Rhodes, one start on the defensive end. Charlie Collins, a guy who was on the team last year, is the backup. The other defensive end spot is going to be Justice Boone or Philip Lee. Those are two transfers. Boone from Florida, Philip Lee from Troy. An interesting name to not see on this list, considering that they went three deep at each of those end positions, is Ken Talley, the defensive end from Michigan State. Guy who I thought would be listed on here over a guy like Frank Mulapola or Kavion Henderson. But a couple transfers in there, and Boone and Lee, I expect to see them play pretty well this weekend. The defensive tackle position, Pittman talked about it, and this was going to be something we talked about in the rundown, but a lot crazier things have happened today. Keyshawn Blackstock moves over from that right guard, right tackle position, losing out that battle to the defensive tackle position because David Oke is hurt. So we're bringing in Blackstock. It seems like from what Pittman was talking about today that he should be a guy that gets some playing time this weekend, but the actual starters, Cameron Ball, Ian Jeffrard, and then Kevin Otis is a depth piece. Danny Saley as a depth piece transfer in from BYU last year. Now at the linebacker position, we got two starting linebackers. This is probably the least surprising position on the defensive side. Steven Dix, Xavier Sorey. Those were going to be our two expected starting linebackers. The backup linebacker positions, there was a lot of names. Bradley Shaw is probably the biggest name. Tavion Wallace is another one just because he's a pretty big time recruit. But Andrew Harris, Trent Whalen, those two guys who are coming in from two other programs transferring in for this year. Those guys, I'm not surprised to see here as well. That rounds out our linebacker position. Defensive backs, where I want to focus the most time on. There's a lot of names here. I'm sure if you've been keeping up with Arkansas football this offseason, we brought in a lot of transfers. So a lot of mid-major transfers that had a lot of minutes coming in, a lot of tackles, a lot of reps, and then some guys from some Power Four conferences, like a Caleb Wooden, like a Kenai Walker. That it's just going to be interesting to see how they fit into our defense. Let's start at the corner position. A little bit of a surprise on one side. I really knew that Neal, Walker, Singletary, those three guys were going to be some sort of big time piece for us this season. I didn't necessarily know how those were going to play out. I know that some depth charts had Julian Neal as a nickel. A lot of outlets had Kenai Walker or Jaheim Singletary as the starting corners, but it switches up a little bit in the official depth chart. Julian Neal, corner from Fresno State, he's going to be one of the starting corners on the outside. Kenai Walker, the other starting corner. And from what I read and what I heard from Pittman, it seems like he's really leaning on these two just because of their length. I think they are good football players, of course, but he said he really prioritized length, guys that can really play on the outside. And I think Julian Neal and Kenai Walker fit that bill. Jaheim Singletary, a little bit smaller of a corner, not too much. Seems like he's going to be behind Kenai Walker. He was one of our starting corners and had a lot of playing time last year. So it's a little bit interesting seeing him as a backup for this upcoming game. Stelman Bridges, Kashawn Davila. Davila, JUCO corner, transfers in. Expected that he was going to really compete for a job. Stelman Bridges, a true freshman last year, one of our more prized recruits in last year's class. It was expected he was going to get a lot of playing time this year as well. So those five guys, it's not too surprising that they are here. And so it's kind of interesting to see how those shake out going into this A&M game. The nickel corner spot, I've heard a lot of buzz around Jordan Young being our starting nickel. So it's not too surprising. Shakur Smalls, another transfer, coming in at the 2 spot behind him. He's definitely had a good camp to get that spot. And then we've got at the safety positions, these are probably another fairly chalk position in the starter expectations. Larry Worth doesn't say free or strong, but he's probably going to play the strong safety position. Quintavious Scandrett was expected to be the backup. It's really the free safety position that I want to highlight more. Miguel Mitchell, Caleb Wooded. Mitchell was a transfer in from Florida last year. I'm excited to see what he can do in year 2. And then Caleb Wood, one of our big time transfers in the defensive back room, coming in from Auburn. He's going to be also getting, seems like similar reps to Miguel Mitchell in this first week. I expect after the first couple weeks to see who kind of wins that battle. I wouldn't be surprised if Wooden does, even though he's the second half of the or statement there. But look for one of those two guys to really cement themselves this weekend. All right, last Section special teams, this one also a little less interesting and a little more chalk as well. Kicker Scott Starzik's getting the official start as the freshman kicker. I'm interested to see. We talked about this in last week's episode about how he does as a true freshman kicker. We didn't have great kicking last year, so I think he can only go up. I think he was the number two kicker according to ESPN for this year's class, so I'm excited to see what he can do. Punter Devin Bale, one of the guys that Pittman mentioned is going to be a captain for this year. Blake Ford's a kickoff guy, Ashton to go, long snapper. And then really here's the big things, the kickoff returner, Rodney Hill, who was our starting kickoff returner last year. And then Cam Shanks, who was I believe, American Athletic first team punt returner, one of the top punt returners in the country, and he's going to be starting a punt return to nobody's surprise. Just a couple notes. This is from wholehogsports.com. So they threw in some stuff kind of just to explain where some of this information is coming from. Just some of the highlights that we kind of talked about. Keyshawn Blackstock moving to defensive tackle. Julian Neal, Kanai Walker being outside corner. Some of the other transfers where they're going to fit in the defensive back room, the receiving room, what that looks like. Some of the offensive line position stuff. So this is a big thing for this week. I'm sure a lot of Arkansas fans are kind of excited to see where a lot of these new guys in a transfer portal world where a lot of guys are coming in, a lot of guys are coming out. Those depth charts are a really big deal to just kind of see who we've really got starting. And obviously, this is an FCS game, so it's not something where we're playing like an Ole Miss or a Notre Dame in week one. But it is just interesting to see who Pittman believing in week one, who he's going to give the majority of the reps to, because those guys have an opportunity to further cement that position. And some of those guys behind have an opportunity to take it from the dudes that are starting. So really interesting to see who we are running with this week against Alabama A&M.